Right, so welcome to the meeting of the Combined Fire Authorities Local Pension Board. Today, I confirm with the first item, which is appointment of chairman, I confirm that Mr. Orson was appointed as chairman at the Combined Fire Authorities meeting this morning. And I now hand over to Mr. Orson.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, and welcome everyone to this afternoon's meeting. Just a brief introduction of myself. I've never been on the Combined Fire Authority ever before, so suddenly find myself elevated to the pension board was a bit of a surprise when I got the email the other day. But hey ho, at least I know Hemant well because he and I've worked well on the police and crime panel for a couple of years now. Hemant didn't think it would help me if we could just shoot round on a very, very quick introduction of everyone. So I try and get everyone into my mind. Like I say, I'm Joe Orson. I'm a member of Leicestershire County Council. I come from Melton Mowbray. I represent what's called the Melton Wolds Division. Hemant, if you could introduce yourself. I'll just go around the screen as it appears on my screen, if that's okay.
Hello. Sure. My name is Councillor Hemant Tribatia. I'm from Leicester City Council and I represent Beaumont Lees Ward. Thank you.
Helen?
I am Helen Scargill. I'm Client Relationship Manager at West Yorkshire Pension Fund, and we now administer the Firefighters Pension Scheme on behalf of Leicestershire Fire.
Thank you. Colin?
Colin, I think you're still on mute.
Thank you. Hi, Colin. Colin Sharp, Deputy Director of Finance at Leicester City Council. As you'll be aware, Leicester City Council provides the treasurer function to the Combined Fire Authority, and I am also the pension scheme manager. That responsibility was passed to me at the Combined Fire Authority meeting earlier this morning. So, from the context of this board, I'm here as the pension scheme manager.
Thanks very much, Colin. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Adam Taylor, firefighter for Leicestershire, employee representative to the local pension board, currently released as the regional secretary for the Fire Brigades Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Sean.
Hello, I'm Sean Connor. I'm a senior HR partner with Derbyshire Fire and Rescue. I've provided advice to the Derbyshire board for a number of years and collaborated with the three services of Derbyshire, Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire. For the last 3 months, my role has been widened to provide advice and support to all three services boards.
Thanks, Sean. Callum, I can't see I think everyone must know who you are.
I'll do it anyway, though. Good morning, everyone, because I know I don't know Helen. I'm Callum Faint. I'm the Chief Fire Officer for Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Callum. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Graham Vaux. I'm Chairman of the Fire Brigades Union for Leicestershire.
Okay, I have other people in attendance which aren't shown on my screen. Eunice.
Everybody, just introduce myself. I'm Eunice Gadger from West Yorkshire Pension Fund. In effect, I work closely with Helen on the fire side as well as obviously other bits. So just here for support, and any issues that need escalating will come to me. Helen, as a client relationship manager, will be the direct contact. But if there is anything that needs escalating, then I'll step in and happy to sort out, really. So at today's meeting, hopefully I'll just support Helen if she needs any support, but I'm sure she won't.
Thank you, Eunice. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Paul Weston, currently the Interim Assistant Chief Fire Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Mick.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Mick Grucock. I'm currently the Interim Assistant Chief Fire and Rescue Officer and Director of Service Support. I've been working really hard in conjunction with certainly Sean and the Pension Scheme Manager, Colin. Congratulations, Colin, on your appointment. To obviously pull the pension details together in my role.
Thank you, Mick. And I think it's just leaves Callum now.
Sorry, Chair. Did you say Callum then?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Callum Faint, the Chief Fire and Rescue Officer for Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service.
Thank you, Callum. And Anna, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, I think most of you all know. Anna Paul, I'm the Democratic Services Officer that supports the local pension board.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's a formality. Whilst I chair the pension board, only if a fresh person comes along at next meeting, obviously we'll have to do it again, but otherwise we all know each other from now on. I'm not aware of any apologies. Is that correct, Anna?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we move to the minutes of the local pension board meeting held on the 20th of April. It's impossible for myself to move those minutes. I have to look. Hemant, were you on the fire authority before?
Yes, I have been, and I can move it on your behalf, Chairman.
Okay. I look for a seconder. Seconded by Graham. All in favour? If you're not in favour, I think the easiest way, if you're not in favour, just say so. Otherwise, we'll pass it on as unanimous. So unanimous, I believe. Conflicts of interest anywhere? No, thank you very much. So we move on to item 5, Pension Fund Administration Report. I'm not totally sure who's going to present this, but it is a report from the West Yorkshire Pension Fund. So, Helen, is it your paper?
Yeah, that's mine. Just start at item 4. It's just an update on what's happening with the production of annual benefit statements. Excuse me, where West Yorkshire Pension Fund are. So we've started the preparation work on the production. We did that a while ago, looking at the statements, looking at the notes that we supply, testing the calculations, making sure everything is working. So that's kind of an ongoing thing. But then in line with guidance which was contained in something called Bulletin 44 provided by the LGA, Local Government Association. Obviously, nobody's statement will reflect the current remedy choices between legacy and reform benefits, because we're not at that stage in the regulations to be able to provide that information. So the current values will be just based on the scheme that the member is in at the point that we run the calculation, and any projections for those who have already transitioned into the 15 scheme will be on the basis of 2015 scheme membership from the date that they moved. We're also confirming that for those members who are currently classed as fully protected members of the final salary schemes, we will not be including any projections for those members, because the remedy provisions mean that these people will move into the Care 2015 scheme on the 1st of April 2022. So any projections done on a final salary basis will mean would all be overstated. So in line with the stance from the National Scheme Advisory Board and the Local Government Association, we've taken that on board, and we will not be providing projections. The production of the statements, they're going to be available to view and download. We won't be posting, so people will have to have signed up to our portal to get to see their own statement. But at the relevant point in the production process, we will send a letter out by post to a member, letting them know that the statement is available and what process they need to go through to get signed up and to be able to see it. In order to provide the statements and be able to do the calculations, we need pay information for the 2021 financial year. I don't believe we've received the information for Leicestershire at the moment. So obviously there is a deadline of the 31st of August to get these statements out. So if this information doesn't get to us fairly soon, then we are going to struggle to meet the deadline. At the moment, no issues, but potentially that we could be moving on to a problem. Then,
sorry, Helen, can I just add that the problem will be that if these statements are issued, then it is a breach that needs reporting to the pensions regulator. So it's quite important, really, that doesn't happen, and therefore we get the return so that we can do our bit in terms of producing these statements.
Okay. Callum, can you advise on any of this?
If you're comfortable, Chair, I'd invite Mick Grucock to come in as he oversees the finance part. Mick, have you got an answer to that, please?
Thank you, Callum, and thank you, Chair. The information that's been asked for, I can't honestly give you a correct answer at this point. I know work is ongoing in relation to collating all of the pension details that have come in recently. I will make it a personal quest of mine today to make sure that I can understand what the data request is, and also to put actions in place to make sure that you get it on time, Helen.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yes, certainly some urgency has to be given to it, Mick. Helen.
So then if we go back to the report, obviously there hasn't been any regulation changes. Obviously lots of things are ongoing, but they haven't got to the point of regulation amendments as yet. The breaches, there hasn't been any breaches in the last quarter. And then here we're just on an update in terms of kind of the ongoing situation with kind of Sargent and Remedy. So as you're probably aware, the consultation response was published in February. Frequently asked questions documents supplied, and other information has been coming out since that point. But in essence, without getting into the complicated nature of what actually is required, it's in its higher level, it's fairly simple. Implementation is going to happen in two parts. We've got something called prospective remedy, which means that all active members of the schemes will be members of the 2015 scheme from the 1st of April 2022. And that will come about through primary legislation, and that will need to be in place before the end of March 2022. And then the second part of it is something called retrospective remedy, and that gives all affected members under their options under this deferred choice underpin for the remedy period. And so that will be going back to everybody that's left and who is in scope for remedy, and giving them the options that they need to make a decision. And then that will be active members being given the relevant options at the point that they leave. And the retrospective remedy comes under secondary legislation. So that's going to be amendments to the regulations by the Home Office. And they are due to be effective from October 2023. So work is just ongoing with that. We're hoping to get a kind of draft consultation of the primary legislation changes fairly shortly, and that will go through process till it gets approved in Parliament. And then there's a second kind of string to that, which is at point 8, which for any pension administrator to be able to implement remedy and to be able to give the information to the members that they need and to update the records accordingly, we need the correct data. So there is a big data collection exercise ongoing, and information and the details about that were also supplied in the same Bulletin 44 produced by the Local Government Association. And I've shown that there's 3 major items that they released. There was the data collection template, notes to go with that, and also some kind of guidance for administrators and fire authorities about what information is required and why it's required and what's going to be done with it. So for this, it's the responsibility of the fire authority to make sure that West Yorkshire Pension Fund have all the information that they need to update member records and to be able to supply the relevant options to members. So what needs to happen is this data collection template. We will mark members' records to show that they are in scope for remedy. We will then run this template against the member records, and wherever possible, we will populate this template with the data that we hold for each member. And if the member has the remedy period starting on the 1st of April 15, there will be 7 rows for that member, 1 for each of the financial years. So then we'll supply the data that we've got. That will be sent to yourselves, to the FRA, who will then need to, 1, confirm that the data that we hold is right, 2, amend anything that's wrong, and 3, supply the information that's missing. So obviously the missing information, if somebody's in the 2015 scheme now, what we don't have is all the information, the pay figures that we would need if they're going to go back into the 92. So all that opposite scheme information will be required. Once that's been populated and sorted out by the Fire and Rescue Authority, it gets returned to us, and then we will update the members' records with all that additional information. And then there'll be a flag put on the record to say that all the data has been supplied and confirmed as correct by yourselves, and we can then proceed with whatever we need to do as an administrator at the relevant time. So that's going to be quite a big job when that template comes through to you, but we're not quite at that stage at the moment. And then there's just an update on something called Matthews. It is also referred to as O'Brien, and can also be referenced as something called as Modified Options Part 2. And this is for retained firefighters who back in 2015 were allowed membership of the pension scheme, the firefighters pension scheme, with a start date back to the 1st of July 2000, and it couldn't go back any further than that. There's been some additional court cases, and now the start date for pension scheme purposes can go right back to the date that the member first became retained. At the moment, we haven't got any further information apart from the fact that we know that the Home Office are working with the lawyers and the Fire Brigade Union to finalise who's going to be in scope and who's going to get the options. So at some time in the future, we'll get a draft consultation that will tell us what they're expecting to be done and how it should be done and who's going to get the options and what and everything else to do with that. And then ultimately the legislation will come out and work will need to be done to give all these members the option. That part of giving the option and writing to the members, doing the calculations, telling them the costs, accessing all the pay, this is all an FRA responsibility. So it will have to be done internally, and it's probably going to run alongside some of the work needed for remedy. As I say, we don't have any detail. All that we've been told is that when this options exercise starts, you'll have an 18-month window to do everything you need to do. And at the end of that 18-month window, if members haven't made the election, then there will be out of time. It will be have to be completed at the end of that 18-month date. And then just the final item is just the key performance indicators for the 3-month period, January 21 to March 21. So as you can see, they're mostly 100%. There's a handful that are under, but it's such like the worst one, the spouse's potential. It's at 50%, but we've only had 2 cases, and one was outside the time limit. And the issue with this one is this is where a pensioner is just asking for details of what would be payable to my wife, children if I die. So because it's a kind of what if calculation, we have to deal with actual deaths and payment of widows and children's that are ongoing. So sometimes that can kind of drop down the list. And also it's dealt with in our pensioner services team, and they have to make all the adjustments for payroll. So they can get busy in the 2 weeks up to payroll running. So sometimes that's why that one can get delayed. The initial letter death in retirement, that's 4 cases, that's just the same. That's 1 case that's in time, but because of the number involved, it's dropped it under the 85%. And then your other one is death in retirement, and there's a couple of those that weren't dealt with within the 5-day time scale. But if you see that the average time taken is 4, so it's probably just that it will have just gone over by a day or 2.
Helen, if I can just add a little bit more clarity as well on the 2 death ones. Sometimes on the death side, we don't automatically get informed by the next of kin. So sometimes there is a little bit of delay in finding out who we need to write to, and that kind of impacts on the target dates as well. So if we don't know immediately that A, there is a next of kin, and B, who that might be, then that's why there's an initial delay in sending that out, because nowadays we get notified of deaths through a number of sources. It could be the dependents themselves, it could be through tellers ones, it could be through the NFI, and sometimes it doesn't have all the details in. The only other one really I don't think you mentioned is the deferred benefit set up on leaving, which again 5 cases, 3 were done within targets, 60%, and again this is one where, as Helen said, obviously our priority is where we're making payments to prioritise those. So where people have left and there's no immediate entitlement to benefits, we do write to these people and say, yeah, we've got your details and we'll contact you shortly. And effectively, it kind of is less priority for us. So that's why this particular KPI you'd probably find is consistent in terms of not meeting the target. But obviously our aim is at some stage when we get up to speed with everything and we've got all the resources we want. We have recruited a number of people recently and they are in training, so hopefully that KPI will go up over time, but it all depends on how much of the work we get through McLeod and other exercises that Helen's referred to as part of all the changes with the fire schemes. But I just wanted to clarify those points really.
Okay, Helen, have you got anything else to say?
No, that completes my update.
Okay, well, thank you, Helen. Obviously, quite a comprehensive report, certainly to me as my first meeting, and I'm very grateful for that. And Eunice, thank you for the contribution you made there. Graham's got his hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Helen. I had a few questions which you've answered, some of them in your report around the annual benefit statements. The question I have is, members, you obviously mentioned in there that the annual benefit statement will not reflect the remedy choice at the minute. Will members be informed of that when the annual pension benefit statements are made available on, it's an online thing, isn't it? Will they be informed of that?
The bulletin came and said, kind of put that on as the responsibility to the FRA to ensure that their members were made aware of what would be happening with benefit statements.
That's great, thank you. That's answered my question, and I'll pick that up with probably with Mick afterwards. The second part of that, then, you've mentioned that those that are protected will not receive projections. Will they receive an annual pension statement, a benefit statement? Sorry.
Yeah, they'll receive a statement, but it'll just give the current value as at the 31st of March 2021. For a lot of members, that will be retirement benefits because they could have retired at that point anyway. What it won't include is possibly, dependent on the specific circumstances, it won't include a projection to 30 years, or it won't include to 55 or to 60 if that's in the future. But they will get a statement with the current values on. Great,
thank you. Apologies for all the questions. I'll just get them out of the way because they're covered, most of them, in your report. Once you've received the information that you need, because obviously the member won't make a decision on the remedy period until they decide to leave, but will there be any point after the remedy when they'll receive an annual pension statement that reflects both options?
It should be the one that has to be produced and sent by the 31st of August 2024. So it can't be done until the computer software has been updated to reflect remedy, because obviously this is a bulk process. So there are certain things that the software suppliers are able to do now, but until they get the actual regulations, they can't kind of fully press on with everything. And as I said, the kind of secondary legislation is going to be, it has to be implemented by October 2023. So that means everybody is shown as a member of the 15 scheme from the 1st of April 2022. All the annual allowance reassessments are done for everybody. And then going forward, it should then reflect the regulations, which then includes the DCU option. And then, so what will happen, or what is looking to happen, is the annual benefit statements will be kind of calculated on one basis, and then there will be a section that says this is the underpin amount that you can have, and then just giving the difference, so highlighting the difference between the two. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work for fire in that much detail, because obviously what it says for fire is that everybody is put back into the legacy scheme for the remedy period. So actually, if the record is showing final salary service to the 31st of March 2022 and then care from that point, the annual benefit statement is going to provide the higher amount, because it's going to give you the 1992 for that remedy period as a matter of course. So then it will have to say something about what you would get if you wanted to convert it to reformed scheme, and how that's going to be shown. We haven't finalised that yet.
No, but we're working towards maybe 2024 when that might be, the statement. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. My last question's on key performance indicators, and the questions around the 10 days if somebody sort of requests an estimate. Is that from when they make the request, or from when West Yorkshire obviously received the information? Because I know that there's information that you've not yet got, certainly for those that are choosing their remedy, or that remedy period. Are we expecting that to perhaps slip because of the scale of the work that's required for when people ask for that estimate?
Yeah, that 10 days is from the point we get the request for the estimate. So it's our internal. So obviously there's a process that happens before then, that they have to go through before we get the data. So that would all add on to the ultimate time the member experiences. In terms of immediate detriment, we're not really doing estimates under immediate detriment. We're doing kind of retirement calculations. So and everything within that is manual. So yes, the timescales, if somebody's waiting for immediate detriment figures, that timescale is likely to be longer than that, just because of the complex nature of what's required. Or it's more likely to show under retirement quote rather than estimate.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Helen. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Mick. So you got no, Graham, sorry, you got no supplementary then? No, okay. Callum, you've been very patient with your hand up.
That's all right. It's just to add a bit more context to one of Graham's questions as well, actually, around the local notification of what will or won't be in the benefit statement. That comms has already gone out in service matters and is due to be repeated another once or twice soon, so that it's not just a one-hit wonder that we'll feed it in, but it has already been communicated once, and it's on the agenda to go back into another two editions of service matters, I believe. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any comment to that, Helen?
No, that's fine. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not aware of anyone else who's got any queries. No. Okay. I can't quite remember. Everything's gone haywire on my. Every time I press the pension meeting on the combined authority link, I get the governance committee at the moment, so I'm not sure what's happening here. But anyway, I can remember the recommendation is effectively to note the report. Is everyone comfortable with that? If not, just say so. Otherwise, I presume it's a yes. Okay, thank you very much. Anna, can you just introduce what the next item is, please, on the agenda?
Yes, let me just see, we're going on. Yes, I was just checking I wasn't on mute. We're going on to the scheme manager's update, which is over to Colin Sharp.
Okay, well, over to you, Colin. And in the meantime, I'll try and find out what's happening with my iPad. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. This is item 6, the pension fund scheme managers update. This will be very brief because the key areas are covered by the reports that follow on the agenda. So I'm happy to move into the following reports with your agreement, Chair.
Okay. You'll have to, like I say, I'm just totally lost. I'm really struggling here at the moment.
Okay. I think we're on to item 7, Anna, next.
Yes, item 7 is pension scheme risk register, and item 8, which I think you also referred to, Colin, is the breaches register.
Correct.
Yes. So if I take those two reports, and together with the age discrimination update and the joint pension update, they essentially form my scheme manager update. So the risk register, which is the item 7 on the agenda, this is a report that we bring to each meeting, really primarily from a governance perspective, to provide some assurance to the board that we have a proper handle on the risks facing the pension, the firefighters' pension scheme. Good governance ensures that there is a risk register in place, and it's also a requirement of the Pension Regulators Code of Practice, as is set out in the report. Each risk is scored currently as it is with the existing actions and controls, and then we look at the further management actions and controls that can mitigate that and have the effect of reducing the risk score. And again, if you're familiar with the approach to risk management and risk matrices elsewhere, that is a fairly standard approach. Look at the risk as it stands without actions and controls, and then look at the controls and look at the mitigated risk. This report, I think, tends not to change too much from meeting to meeting. So in paragraph 7, I've highlighted the key changes since the previous report, and they are obviously the West Yorkshire Pension Fund has now been appointed as the administrator, and we've just heard from Helen and Eunice that we have now got agreement for joint pension specialist across Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire, as Sean described when he introduced himself at the start of the meeting, which is good progress. I know I have an aircraft going overhead. And I've also updated the risk register to reflect the ongoing developments following the national age discrimination judgments, which are the subject of a separate report further down the agenda, and I'm sure will continue to be a major item of discussion at the board. So that's really all that I wanted to say by way of introduction. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, okay. I think I've got this under control now, my iPad, but sorry about that. Members, any queries? Okay, you've done well there then, Colin. Obviously, you've given enough for them and people are satisfied. I'm always happy, by the way, under any other business, just to come back as long as Colin's still with us, which I'm sure he will be. So it's not a total cut-off in my world. So I just, obviously, members are comfortable to note that report, yes? Or just say not, if not, otherwise, yep. Okay, thank you very much. So, by me then, and hopefully Anna will confirm, it's item 7, the LFRS Firefighters Pension Scheme Risk Register. Yes?
Yes.
No, that's the one that we've just done, Chair.
You've just you went into that, didn't you, Colin?
Yeah. Yes.
We're on to 8, Mr. Orson, the
yeah. Okay.
register.
Yeah.
Yep. So, Colin.
Okay. Thank you. So item 8 is similarly a report that is brought to the board each time for governance purposes. This advises the board as to whether there have been any breaches during the period since the last meeting. I'm pleased to report that there are no breaches to tell you about, but as I say, from a governance perspective, we bring a 0 report anyway, so that you can be assured of that. I think Helen has referred in her administrator's presentation to an example of a breach, which would be if the annual statements aren't issued by the end of August. That is the sort of thing that would feature in it if it were to happen. Obviously, I don't expect it to happen. Yeah, as I say, so really it's a 0 report, but important in itself to advise you of that.
Okay, queries? No hands up. Noted. Silence says yes. Okay, noted. Thank you very much. Move on to item 9.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That is also me to start. So I will give you just a brief overview of the written report that you have, and then I'll hand over to Sean Connor, who will provide you with a much more expert and up-to-date position as regards immediate detriment and all that's been going on in that world over the last couple of weeks in particular. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update to the board on the developments around the firefighters pension scheme age discrimination remedy. We brought a comprehensive report to the last meeting of the board in April. And you may have either seen, obviously, been part of that at the time, or perhaps had a look at it subsequently. Just particular points to highlight on this report are that it set out its developments at the time of writing. Although it was written fairly recently, things do move on, and I think as Sean will cover in his verbal update, things have indeed moved on since the report was written. The board at its last meeting agreed 4 actions, and they're set out at paragraph 5. We have ceased the taping of members onto the 2015. That was an immediate action. And we have subsequently been focusing on item 2 of that, which was pension scheme managers who are approaching retirement and any ill health cases. The team have been particularly working on those within the fire service, finance and HR teams, and working with West Yorkshire. And then the paragraph also sets out some other actions that were agreed that we haven't yet got onto for the reasons described. Paragraph 7 just reiterates that a range of national guidance decisions, legislation are needed to be able to fully implement the age discrimination remedy, and Sean may have some more to say about that. And that they're expected to take place over the next couple of years. So some things can happen soon. Some things will need to wait. And I think again, Helen's already referred to 2024 with regards to certain matters that the administrators will focus on. Nonetheless, as set out in paragraph 8, there has been a lot of activity going on, and I can certainly attest to that, having come into working on the pension scheme more sort of over the last few months. It's taking quite a lot of my time, a lot of Mick Grewcock's time, a lot of everybody's time really with all the age discrimination remedy, and we've set out at paragraph 8 some of the actions that we have been and are currently taking, again just to provide some assurance to the board and other colleagues that we are actively onto these matters. I think that's probably really all that I want to say by way of introducing the written report. Content right now to hand over to Sean to give us a more technical and up-to-date position.
Thanks so much, Colin. Sean, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very wide topic area, so I shall try my best to be succinct, but if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to add some fine detail. By its very nature, delivering an immediate detriment remedy is calculating and putting into payment someone's pension before the regulations have been written and put through Parliament in April 22. So the bigger the gap between what government are furnishing us with now regarding key policy decisions, maybe circumnavigating tax legislation. Helen mentioned the software needs writing to avoid manual calculations of pensions. All of those issues, the bigger the gaps between what we need as a full remedy design and what government are giving us now, then the bigger the risk the pension scheme member is taking in accepting an immediate detriment remedy. And I said I'd avoid the fine detail, but I'll just give you one example, which is a big ticket example. There has been a theoretical risk that although a judge can give an interim order that says services need to pretend the 2015 scheme never existed and treat 92 members as if they never left the 92 scheme, what the judge wasn't able to say because he didn't have the legal power is go on to say, and government should amend tax legislation to integrate with my judgment. And the problem with tax legislation is it was never written with a retrospective pension remedy in mind. So as one example, there has always been a theoretical risk that we deliver an immediate detriment remedy to a pension scheme member. But then once the regulations are written in 12 months' time, we discover that what we should have done is look at, because we're looking at 7 years retrospective pension growth, but it's being implemented over 1 year, that 7 years growth into 1 year's calculation breaches annual allowance charges. And there was always the theoretical risk that we'd have to go back to a pension member and say, sorry, but now the regulations have been written, we realise that you owe a £28,000 tax charge. Now, in my mind, that was never a real risk. I always thought government would do the right thing. But in law, an employer can't advise a firefighter based on what we hope government will do the right thing. So there've always been some theoretical risks, but there have always been some real risks of key differences between the assumptions we might make now and put in payment to pension compared to those waiting for those government key policy decisions that are converted into regulations. Sorry, I promised to be succinct, didn't I? So the bigger the gap, the bigger the risk to the firefighter. I'm happy to say, as Colin suggested in his introduction, that as fresh as last Thursday, Home Office released some guidance that we've been assured is imminent since the beginning of April. So last Thursday, we received the Home Office guidance, which addresses a lot of those key policy decisions that we've been waiting for. And on the same day, in the same release, the Local Government Association released their guidance on implementing the Home Office guidance. And then as recently as yesterday morning, we had services and administrators had a meeting with the LGA to allow us the opportunity to ask questions and clarify anything that still might be open to interpretation in those two documents. So to cut a long story short, a lot of those risks that had the pension board have been held last week, a lot of those risks that I might have been talking about last week, I can now confirm they've been addressed. Not all of the risks have been addressed. Home Office and government haven't made all of the key policy decisions they need to make to provide a full remedy, but those risks have been reduced. I'll save you the fine detail of that Thursday's guidance, but it's not all good news for firefighters. It clarifies types of cases that might be out of scope of receiving an immediate detriment. And I think services that were early adopters might be reading that guidance and being a little worried and already considering having to go back to some of their pensioners who took immediate detriment. But as an example, and I don't know if Leicestershire has any of these cases, a firefighter who, if he converted more of his 2015 service into 92 service, would mean that a contribution holiday might be payable. They are out of scope to receive an immediate detriment. So if a pension member who might be due a contribution holiday effectively has two options: take a pension now under the existing 2015 regs, or delay his retirement until possibly after April 22. There is a small gap in the clouds where, although, and this is a really movable feast, very dynamic, things change on almost a daily basis, whilst we've only just received the Home Office and LGA guidance, the LGA is already telling us about a framework that might be released within, I feel, months, not years, certainly before the April 22 regs, that might add even more clarity and might, I emphasise, might pull some more people who are currently out of scope back into scope. That legal framework is being currently discussed with the LGA's lawyers and Bevan Britton, and I understand Bevan Britton are probably speaking with Walker's, the FBU solicitors, to reach agreement on that framework. And as soon as agreement is reached, then steering group will release that to services, and it might give us even more clarity. But for now, we have a level of damage limitation in explaining to those people who might be out of scope why they're out of scope. There are very good legal reasons, financial reasons and taxation reasons why someone with a contribution holiday can't have an immediate detriment remedy now. Another example is, whilst these publications address a lot of risks, there are still people with certain circumstances, certain special cases where there remains quite a lot of risk. For instance, if anyone has been divorced since 2015 and has a pension sharing order because of the divorce, they're not necessarily out of scope for an immediate detriment remedy, but we would have to have very specific discussions without them about their specific circumstances, because there remains quite a significant risk of, once the regulations have been written, the pension we give them on immediate detriment remedy, we might have to go back in 12 months' time and say, sorry, but that pension you've been having for the last year, you now need to pass £20,000 of that to your ex-wife. So risks remain, but the number of risks have been reduced vastly, and the number of risks that remain, the financial extent of them, for most of them, are a lot smaller, and where there is still quite a significant financial extent, therefore quite special cases where the frequency of those cases should be quite small. And for all I know, Leicestershire might not have any of those cases. So this is all good news. Next steps. Colin and Helen and Eunice have already talked to you about the data collection we've been doing in the background. So we'll be able to give, once the board makes a formal decision on delivering immediate detriment remedy based on this paper, Helen will be able to work with Leicestershire third-party payroll provider and finance department in extracting that data. We'll be able to identify the people who are in immediate detriment. We'll be able to identify those people who are in those anomaly special cases and put them into probably 6 or 7 different pools. More generically and wider, I plan to draft some kind of communication for all firefighters to see within a couple of weeks, so that everyone can better understand that fine detail of what an immediate detriment remedy might mean, so that then we write to individuals who might fall in immediate detriment for them to consider, do I want to express an interest in having more detailed discussions? So the fact that we've furnished them with some kind of newsletter or presentation that gives them a list of the risks that are being addressed and the risks that remain, they'll be able to make a better informed decision on what's my appetite for considering an immediate detriment remedy. For those who express an interest, and obviously we still need to design all of these processes for how we do all of this, but for those who express an interest, we'll then have further discussions with West Yorkshire to deliver those 2 benefit illustrations, one under existing 2015 regs, one on an immediate detriment remedy, so that the members can contrast and compare, and we'll then have individual discussions with them with union representation if they so wish, where we can go into the specifics of their case, the specifics of, are they a special case because they've transferred a pension pot from an external pension fund, or because they've been divorced since 2015, etc., etc. So that by the time they're able to make a decision on, do I have the appetite to take an immediate detriment remedy, or do I want to still retire now but take it on 2015 regs and take my remedy in the future once the Act of Parliament has been written, or do I just want to delay my retirement? They can make their decisions on those 3 options, furnished with all the information and able to fully understand those risks. So one thing we need to get out to members is, the sooner they start to consider their appetite, and once we've furnished them with the generic information, the sooner they want to be giving us notice that they're thinking of retiring, the better it is in their very much their interest. Because as Helen has already said, there is no software to do automatic calculations of immediate detriment, neither for the services nor for the pension administrator. So in a good year, without immediate detriment, when Helen has the software, having 3 months notice of retirement is nice. Now, having 3 months notice of retirement is essential if the member actually wants their pension to kick in after their pay has expired. And it's also in their interest because of tax relief issues on contribution arrears, but I promised you I'd avoid the fine detail, didn't I? So they're the next steps. I think from a board perspective, the risk of legal challenge for not delivering a pension remedy is sorted. We've effectively got a green light to deliver an immediate detriment remedy. And the few people who might be out of scope, we have very good information and justification from government to explain why they're out of scope, which I would hope would mean people would deselect from considering legal challenge. And the level of risk that firefighters were open to, and potentially the authority from legal challenges for not furnishing firefighters with sufficient information, has been greatly mitigated because government have finally given us those further key policy decisions. I emphasise this is still not the full remedy design. There are still risks, but the frequency and extent of those risks to firefighters and therefore the board and the authority have been vastly diminished with this information that we've thankfully had for 3 working days now. Unless there's any questions, I think that's as succinct as I can be. Thank you.
Quite detailed. Obviously, a bit of interest. Graham was just beat Adam with his hand up there.
Adam may well have the same questions. Thank you, Sean. I know some of this is quite new. I know you avoided going into the finer detail, but the bigger questions from our members is clearly the tax implications, like you've mentioned, of breaching the annual allowance and the tax relief of the contributions. Is there any more detail you can provide on whether that's been avoided, or whether members can start to pay back contributions sooner? Has that been looked into, those that are in scope with immediate detriment?
Yes, thank you. Happy to answer those questions. So with regards to employee contributions, tax legislation can't be changed yet, and tax legislation says that you can only get tax relief on employee contributions whilst you're an employee paying those arrears through your pay, not through your pension lump sum. So that is another good reason why it is in everyone's interest to give the service as much notice of their impending retirement as possible, because the more pay months the service has to deduct those contribution arrears, the more tax relief the employees will get. And this is a mix and match approach. I'm not an expert on this, but there is a legal flaw as to how much net payroll is allowed to leave the employee with. So even if the employees wanted to pay us £1,500 a month in employee contributions, they couldn't, because I think we have to pay at least national minimum wage in net pay. And obviously we need to leave enough money to pay the tax and national insurance on the gross pay. But roughly speaking, I mean, seriously, £500 a month, I don't think is a problem if the firefighter could afford it. The more they pay through their pay, the more they will get immediate tax relief. If by the time they retire, they haven't paid the total employee contribution arrears, the remainder will be offset from the pension lump sum. So Leicestershire payroll will notify West Yorkshire to deduct whatever's remaining from the pension lump sum, and it's that remaining level that the member won't get pension tax relief on straight away. That tax relief will still be delivered. Government have confirmed that, so it's not lost money, but it's delayed money. That tax relief will be delivered not via HMRC. It will be for those of you who know about the retained modified pension scheme and how HMRC kept moving the goalposts with regards to tax relief for that, government have learned from that. So we are totally pushing HMRC out of this equation. Home Office are devising their own refunds process, and any members who couldn't pay back the contributions from their pay before they retired will be able to go to Home Office to get the remaining tax relief. The downside is that might not happen until October 23. Certainly not before April 22, but it might be as late as October 23. But it's not dead money. And as I say, this is fresh off the printing press last Thursday. So Mick, Colin and I need to really work with Julie and Helen and the payroll provider to fully work out the processes of how we get information out to immediate detriment firefighters, how quickly we can get the data to Helen, how quickly we can get the benefit illustrations to immediate detriment members, how quickly therefore we can have those one-to-ones, so how quickly can the immediate detriment members give their notice in. And I can't really give you answers on that right now, but the more notice people give us or give Leicestershire, the more payroll have to deduct those arrears from contributions from net pay, and therefore we give tax relief at source. Sorry, I've already forgotten. My answer was so long, I've forgotten what your other question was.
Just the risk you mentioned in terms of breaching the annual allowance with those contributions, has that been removed?
Thank you. That's an easy one. Yes. So there was the theoretical risk, which we never thought would happen, but legally we couldn't say that to people. There was the theoretical risk that 7 years pension growth would be assessed in 1 year and therefore they'd breach annual allowance. Government stage 1 proposals in July 2020 gave us assurances that wouldn't happen. Then all of a sudden with their February 21 stage 2 proposals, government was silent, which made some of us conspiracy theorists a little bit worried. They've clarified now last Thursday that when it comes to the annual allowance calculations, it's not good news for administrators and payroll, but we'll have to go through year on year back to 2015, looking at the pension input amount, how much was pensionable pay in 2015-16 tax year. That gives us the pension input amount for the following year, and then do the following year's calculations all manually. It will be done year on year with annual thresholds. So yeah, we're out of the woods with that huge, significant theoretical risk of an annual leave charge. Obviously, some people might face increased annual leave charges, but only fairly, because their year-on-year benefits have genuinely gone up. So we're not talking about firefighters, we're talking maybe watch managers, maybe station managers, depending on their career trajectory over that period.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Chair.
Adam.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for your report, Sean, and the previous reports from Helen and Colin. I have an additional question to what Graham's raised, which I was also going to raise. A lot of emphasis is placed, and understandably, by the way, a lot of emphasis is placed on active firefighters, active members of the pension scheme, and pensioners, and the remedy implications of those groups. I suppose my question, is there a mechanism currently, because I appreciate they possibly sit out of scope as per sort of the guidance documents that you refer to, is there a mechanism where that members that since 2015 have passed away to look at cases to retrospectively sort of put right those particular cases? And I sort of refer to the public sector government response document that says that they will be looked at as a priority. I'm not entirely sure, is that a priority following the regulations, or is that a priority now prior to the regulations being implemented?
Thank you, Adam. Yes, I think in terms of priority, both sets of people are the same priority. I think the problem is, and I don't fully understand the problems, but I think the problem is the complexity with pensioners and the complexity with death in service cases is even greater than with active firefighters. So whilst government and all other stakeholders are working with the same level of priority for all of those groups, it's just unfortunately a longer job for those death in service cases. So yes, death in service, future deaths in service, for want of a better word, is out of scope of immediate detriment. And currently there is no further design from government for existing widower cases, if you like, for want of a better word. I do wonder, and please don't, I haven't been given any indications, so I'm not kind of saying this with a nod and a wink to you, I genuinely don't know, but I do wonder if that's part of the discussions with this LGA framework that I'm discussing, I said. I'm not discussing the framework with anyone. I have no real knowledge of what that framework will cover. But I do wonder, I think the LGA and government and obviously FBU have a list of what are the remaining gaps, and retrospective pensioner cases, I do suspect we'll have to wait until the regulations have been written. Retrospective and prospective death in service cases, I think is different, and I would hope that maybe prospective death in service cases might be addressed in this framework, but I genuinely don't know. But with regards to being dealt with as a priority, I assure you everyone's kind of in the same priority. It's just the complexities are even harder with regards to retrospective cases.
Chair, just okay to come back.
Yeah, by all means.
Thank you, Sean. No, I probably should have said that from the outset. I fully understand the complexities, and there'll be even further complexities when considering the fact that actually the members were protected or taper protected, hadn't transferred across onto the 2015, and survivor benefits or survivor beneficiaries were based on the 92, but actually given the option, different decisions may have been made. I suppose just a yes or no, maybe just for this question, is there a mechanism that this could be addressed, or is it simply a case that actually the mechanism does not exist and we must wait for those regulations? Or could it be that we look at those cases with an element of risk to address them?
I'm not the best person to be asking, but certainly I haven't been furnished with the fine detail, but the way Claire Alcock, the National LGA Fire Pensions lead, describes it, it really is there isn't a remedy with a little r, never mind a big R. It is very difficult to work around all the existing legislation and find a way to do it, even without a heightened level of risk. It's really for government to be considering, how do we get around this and square this circle? Everyone wants to, but it is just that the total legislative framework stops it happening.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Is there any other queries for Sean? So, well, thank you very much, Sean. I must admit, you lost me here in odd places, especially when you said you were going to try your best to keep off detail, but I do understand how you crept into it, so no problem there. But thank you very, very, very much. So, obviously,
Mr. Orson, sorry, it's Anna. Helen Scargill's got a hand up. I don't know whether it's a previous hand or a new one.
No, it's new. Just kind of a bit of follow up from some of what Sean said. Although he said that obviously deducting the outstanding pension contributions through pay whilst the member's active gives tax relief. The one thing that you do need to kind of be aware of with that, there is a risk, possibly very small, that the tax relief could be given at the wrong rate for members. So they do need to be aware of that before they agree that they want the tax relief that they can get now, because I don't know whether there's going to be anything in place to allow that tax relief to be adjusted at a later date. I mean, I suspect it's highly unlikely, but it is there and it needs to be kind of stated. And then the other thing, just in terms of annual allowance, for most members, as Sean says, we'll do the reassessments, and it is likely that the members' pension input will increase using legacy service, but in the majority of cases, that will not produce a tax charge. We've done a handful of cases so far, and that's how it's panned out. But there is a massive area of risk and possibly an area that you might want to consider cannot be done, and that is for those who have already got a tax charge for and a scheme pays debit in the 15, 16, 16, 17 tax years, because the legislation will allow a member to deal directly with HMRC, send a revised self-assessment and notify them of that increased tax charge. we can make that additional payment and revise the scheme pays debits only for the current year and the previous 4. So that leaves 15-16 and 16-17 out of that. What the guidance says is that at the moment you cannot adjust that tax, and there's no mechanism to make a payment of extra tax. It does say that if the tax goes down, ultimately through government there will be a compensation refund of that extra tax and the member won't lose out. But what it doesn't tell us is what we need to do for the ones where the tax increases. So that there is a suggestion that at some point in the future we may then get told what needs to be done in terms of this additional tax, but we've got no idea what that's going to be and how that's going to work. So the question for those members is, do you just say they are out of scope? Do you, as an FRA, say we want to allow this person to retire and we want the benefits calculating based on the applying a scheme pays debit to that increased tax amount, even though that increased amount of tax hasn't been paid to HMRC? Is that the right thing to do? Can you do that? I don't know. But that's not something we as an administrator would make the decision on. So you just need to be aware that although it's answered a lot of questions about annual allowance and it does allow us to proceed with our calculations with a lot of comfort, there is still an area within that with a big, massive question mark over. And if you have somebody like that, you might want to put them out of scope. So that's just a bit more of an update.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. Graham, you got any comment on that, or Adam? No. Okay then. Well, thank you very much, Helen. That obviously helpful. I don't believe anyone else has got anything to say on that, so I'll say my normal. All comfortable to note. Just keep quiet if that's the case. Yeah, thanks very much. So moving on, I think my iPad's beginning to settle down now from going all over the place. It is item 10, isn't it now?
It is, yes, the Joint Pension Board update.
So, Colin, I presume.
It is.
You're on mute, Colin.
That's it. Sorry, Chairman. I unmuted myself on my headset, but it didn't translate itself through to Teams. Yes, as regards the Joint Pension Board, members may recall that there has been a desire for some considerable time now to have a pension board covering Leicestershire, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, which would tie in, for example, with Sean, who is now working across all 3 authorities, and also with West Yorkshire Pension Fund, who are now acting as administrative for the authorities. That, I understand, remains with the government. It requires government approval to establish one pension board covering Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire and Leicestershire, rather than us each having our own. And obviously other things have been occupying national government's mind, I think, for the last 12 to 18 months. I suspect 5 pension boards are not top of the list. So we will continue to pursue that one. It is still there as something that we would like to at least get permission for, and then probably bring back to the respective boards. Okay. That's thank you.
Any questions for Colin? Okay, thank you very much, Colin. Noted.
Okay, thank you.
Item 11, employee representative input. I never heard that phrase before. Is that you, Graham?
Yes, thank you, Chair. All of the questions that we had and comments have been covered in the previous agenda items by both Sean and Helen. So we've not got anything further to add. Thank you.
Okay, we're quite content so far. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. So we move on to item 12, date of next meeting, 22nd of September 2021 via Microsoft Teams, following the next Combined Fire Authority. Number 13, any other business? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. You've all been stars. You've been very understanding of myself when my iPad went down. And Anna, thank you. I always think the clerk to these things are, I just don't know how you managed to keep all the notes so that when the minutes come back, they're all smack on. So well done to you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. Well, enjoy the rest of the day, everyone, and we'll see you in September.
Thank you, Chair. Take care.
All right. Cheers, then.
Thank you.
Bye.